Good day, everyone. Today we're starting off with paragraph 10 of chapter 3, and we're going to get started now. There can therefore be no question of putting thinking and feeling on a level as objects of observation, and the same could easily be shown of other activities of the human spirit. Unlike thinking, they must be classed with other observed objects or events. The peculiar nature of thinking lies just in this, that it is an activity which is directed solely upon the observed object and not on the thinking personality. This is apparent even from the way in which we express our thoughts about an object, as distinct from our feelings or acts of will. When I see an object and recognize it as a table, I do not, as a rule, say, I am thinking of a table, but this is a table. On the other hand, I do say, I am pleased with the table. In the former case, I am not at all interested in stating that I have entered into a relation with the table, whereas in the latter case, it is just this relation that matters. In saying, I am thinking of a table, I already enter the exceptional state characterized above, in which something that is always contained, though not as an observed object, within our spiritual activity, is itself made into an object of observation. So the summary for paragraph 10 is, as thinking is an activity directed only to the observed object, and feeling inevitably reveals my relationship to the object, thinking and feeling are not equal as objects of observation. So that's really the main point of that, and that's very important to get clear in your mind, is that, we can't compare thinking and feeling. They're two completely separate things, and they reveal two separate things about us. I mean, thinking reveals one thing, feeling reveals our relationship to things, and thinking reveals, knowledge about stuff. It doesn't reveal our relationship necessarily, unless you, of course, form concepts about the feelings, and then in that sense, yes. But we have to make clear that thinking and feeling are not equal as objects to observe. That is the main point of that paragraph. So they're different. So get that clear in your mind, folks. All right. Let's proceed to paragraph 11. This is just the peculiar nature of thinking, that the thinker forgets his thinking while actually engaged in it. What occupies his attention is not his thinking, but the object of his thinking, which he is observing. And that's a short one, so the summary is, thinking is peculiar in that the thinker, unaware of the process while engaged in it, is only aware of the object of contemplation. And I think that's pretty clear. So when we're thinking, our thinking is directed to the object. So, we forget that we're thinking. We don't realize we're thinking until we're done thinking, and there you go. And paragraph 12 is another shorty. So 12 is, the first observation which we make about thinking is therefore this, that it is the unobserved element in our ordinary mental and spiritual life. And there's not much to summarize in that. It's pretty much, that's the summary. But what we did was we wrote for the summary, hence the first observation that we make about thinking is that it is the unobserved element in our ordinary mental and spiritual life. And the other summary we have as well is, thinking is the unobserved element in our ordinary mental and spiritual life. And that is one important point, is basically it's unobserved point, and we have to be aware of it, that we're doing it. And we're going to be moving on to 13 now. The reason why we do not observe the thinking that goes on in our ordinary life is none other than this, that it is due to our own activity. Whatever I do not myself produce appears in my field of observation as an object. I find myself confronted by it as something that has come about independently of me. It comes to meet me. I must accept it as something that precedes my thinking process as a premise. While I am reflecting upon the object, I am occupied with it. My attention is focused upon it. To be thus occupied is precisely to contemplate by thinking. I attend not to my activity, but to the object of this activity. In other words, while I am thinking, I pay no heed to my thinking, which is of my own making, but only to the object of my thinking, which is not of my making. The summary we have for that is, when I think, I do not look at my thinking, which I myself am producing, but at the object of thinking, which I am not producing. And so that's why we don't observe it so easily, is because we're too busy thinking to notice it. We're too busy thinking about the object to notice that we're thinking about this object. So it's a little tricky to observe, I guess. But I guess once you start to realize that this idea, that this fact, that we don't realize we're thinking because we're too busy thinking about whatever object we're thinking about, then we can maybe start the process of observing our thinking. And that is paragraph 13. And do I have time for 14? Yeah, sure, what the hell, let's do it. Let's get her done. 14. I am moreover in the same position when I enter into the exceptional state and reflect on my thinking. I can never observe my present thinking. I can only subsequently take my experiences of my thinking process as the object of fresh thinking. If I wanted to watch my present thinking, I should have to split myself into two persons, one to think, the other to observe this thinking. But this I cannot do. I can only accomplish it in two separate acts. The thinking to be observed is never that in which I am actually engaged, but another one. Whether for this purpose I make observations of my own former thinking, or follow the thinking process of another person, or, finally, as in the example of the motions of the billiard balls, assume an imaginary thinking process, is immaterial. And the summary we have for that is, I can never observe my present thinking because thinking and the observation of thinking are two separate acts. So again, I think that's a pretty clear summary, and we do have to make it clear in our minds that you cannot think and observe thinking at the same time. They're two separate things. So you can think about thinking, and then you'll notice yourself after, you'll notice your thoughts about thinking, but you can't really observe yourself thinking while you're thinking. It's a little tricky. So that's the point. You can only take your experiences of thinking as your process as your process of observation. I think that's pretty clear. I want to make sure. Yeah, I think they've pretty much stated all what's important in paragraph 3 is that it's two separate acts. The thinking to be observed is never that in which I am actually engaged, but another one. Yeah. So first you think about thinking, and then you'll be able to understand it. And oh yes, that's what I wanted to tell you guys. Is that he here is starting the process of now making thinking as an act of observation. So now we are beginning to make thinking as an object of observation, and that's what he's going to probably do for the rest of this paragraph. Is going to be discussing thinking and his observations and thoughts about thinking. So that's going to be the main, that's going to be the turning point. This paragraph is sort of taking that focus from thinking about what role thinking plays, and then now it's about making thinking that object of observation. So he'll have lots of interesting things to point out and whatnot, and then we'll see how thinking is in fact important in the acquiring of knowledge and what role it plays. So I will see you all next time.